Be here.
Thank you very much for taking the time. Just before we get going, everything is not financial advice. This is for information and entertainment purposes only, and all opinions are people's own. Okay, that's that out of the way. I want to dive straight into probably for me what was one of the exciting parts of the week, which is yesterday when you met with Saylor. Having met him in Vegas, only a month ago. What was it like? What did you talk about? And was it just like a private meeting? Was it just you and him, or yeah? Tell us
And
more.
CEO.
Cool. Tell us
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. So they reached out to me before Prague, because they wanted to speak to me. And we couldn't make it happen, unfortunately, because I've been, incredibly busy with everything that I've got to do. And we agreed that we'd meet up in London. So that's what we did. So I was in London yesterday. I had a talk at Aquis. I had another meeting in the afternoon, and there was, a gap. So we met up for an hour, and yeah, we had a great chat. Actually, it was amazing. It was quite funny because so he gave me some really good ideas. He agrees with our strategy. He believes that the way that we're funding the business is very, very sensible, i.e., pure equity, nothing else than that. Until much, much further down the road. And he thinks that we're doing a great job. He thinks that we've got a good position in the UK. He thinks that we'll be the dominant force for years to come, and we can grow past my ambitions. He also it was really funny because obviously I've been an investor in strategy for about 5 years, and he he's sort of seen so many videos with him, and obviously I've got tremendous respect for him. But me, him, and his CEO sat in the room, and he was propending everything with smarter this, smarter that, and it was really cool. And I think when you speak to somebody who's done a lot, you can often learn from what they've done that they wouldn't do again. So there were certain conversations that we had, which I won't go into, where he was saying, "Well, don't do these things, do these things." And and it was really kind of him to take the time and to offer to be there in case we have any questions at any time. So yeah, I was really looking forward to it. Somebody was speaking to me before I went there, and they were saying, I was like, I've got to be gone in 5 minutes, because I had to get there. I was almost late actually. um, and and they were saying, I said, "Oh, it's a really important meeting with somebody, and I can't tell you any more than that," because I didn't know whether he'd be happy for me to tell anyone. You see,
Yeah.
and yeah, and so I was really biting my lip, not to say anything about it. And then, at the end, I thought, well, I gave him some Smarter Web Company T-shirts actually, because I got a couple of samples of those, and then I said to him, I said, "Oh, could we maybe get a photo? And would you mind if I put it on social media? Because I'm very conscious that whilst this week has been the best week ever for the company, it's been the worst week ever for the share price." And he was fine. He said, "Yeah, let's go and find someone with a better light." And we took a picture, and then I walked out of the meeting and stuck it on X.
Brilliant. Um, and this kind of leads to the next question, I guess. People are reading the tea leaves or looking for breadcrumbs and stuff. Based on the wording of the strategic investor on Monday, is that Michael Saylor?
Well, I can't say anything about that because
Sure.
it's a private matter. In the UK, you disclose if you get over 3%. Um, so it's the same question as when people ask me about who's in the various different books that we've done. I can't say. It's private, and everything that gets disclosed or needs to get disclosed does get disclosed. I'm really grateful to everyone that supported us to date, both by buying shares on the market, and both by taking part in the institutional raises and the retail raises, and that private subscription that we've done. But I can't say things that I'm not meant to say, and it wouldn't be fair to whoever it may be.
I kind of knew the answer, but it came up a lot, and so
It's worth asking, isn't it? Just in case.
I had to ask it.
Privacy is so important, so I wouldn't want people. Well, actually, funnily enough, there's been an awful lot of rumours going around this week about the company, and some of them are quite hurtful, quite offensive. But I was going to say that I wouldn't want people saying things about me or my company that aren't true. But I just do what I believe is right, and others will do what they believe is right. So we'll carry on that basis.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Obviously, you've already mentioned it's been a pretty tough week on the market. What would you like to say or remind shareholders about with regards SWC and the sort of where we go from here?
Well, so we've been listed for just over 2 months now, and it's been an incredible 2 months. I'm working tirelessly to get things done. My last call ended last night at 11:30 UK time. I was up about 4:30. We had an RNS out yesterday morning. Just an easy one. I did my best to do all the meetings that I did to the best of my ability, and so I'm certainly trying my best on that front. The company is stronger than it's ever been. We've got a treasury using publicly available information of over £100 million. That's pretty good for a company that's been listed for 2 months. I believe that the company's in the strongest position that it's been by far, compared with, when we started the week. I always say that I want to do better each week. I'm not in control of the share price. I believe it's incredible value. It's probably almost the cheapest that it's ever been since we've been listed. If you're looking at the underlying, holdings, the operating business is doing well. There's been more than one sale this week, so I obviously can't say any more than that, but that's pretty good. So everything's going really well. It's just the share price isn't, and I think part of the reason, if we're all honest about that, is that there's an incredible number of tiny little companies, most of which don't own any Bitcoin, most of which have never bought any Bitcoin. In terms of the people running them, in our sector, I don't think that helps the UK as a whole. But I also see it as temporary. So my job is to stick to the mission, to keep focusing on that, to try and push things forward every week, and that's what I'm doing. I bought some shares today. I bought some shares yesterday. I see it as a fantastic opportunity for my private money to do that, and I just keep doing the best job that I can do, and keep trying to push it forward. I was, I'm amazed that people like Michael Saylor want to spend time and help us. I've had another message today from another very well-respected person who wants to see me next week as well. So I'll do my best to make the time for them. And on that side of things, it's going fantastically well. I spent some time yesterday with somebody to try and understand what was happening on the market side of things. I can't tell you who that is, but they're going to be one of the best person, to be able to give me that information. It's just a case of, pushing on with the mission, no more complicated than that.
Awesome. So the next question, I'm moving on to the sort of community ones now. The first one's a bit of fun. It's from Adrian Morris, who you went on his podcast the other day. I would ask if he still thinks that we are possibly, hypothetically, maybe doing okay. In addition, after SWC reaches 1,000 BTC, if that's maybe officially the moment we go from okay to somewhat good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we are doing okay. That's for sure. Um, Probably. Well, I think everyone knows based on the amount of cash that we've got that we've clearly got ourselves to a position where we've beaten that initial target. Jesse and myself have been talking about the next target, and we've got a number there.
Okay. Can
You
you
know,
share it with us?
Probably not today. I'd be interested to know what everyone like, because the number that we've come up with is fairly obvious to guess actually. And looking at my spreadsheet, I would say that we're not actually that far away from being able to get to that number with a clear and defined path. Um, so, so I think you need to give us a couple more days, maybe a little bit longer. We're working on a new investor deck because that's something that we can put on the website so people can understand the detail a little bit more. I'm getting a lot of conversations with people where they are they've got much bigger amounts of money, but they're very unfamiliar with the space, and that's a thing that a lot of people don't realise actually about the UK, particularly you know some of the global capital. That a lot of the institutional capital in the UK doesn't understand the space anywhere near as well as the retail investors. So that deck that we're talking about, which probably will be done by mid next week with a bit of luck, I've been working on it for about 2 weeks with me, so we are close. But I want it to be good and strong, and to have some of the things that people have said, to make it better. And that will probably have that target in there. Sort of an internal company target, maybe that's how we'll phrase it.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of numbers being thrown around. When we spoke in Vegas, you were sort of like, I don't know if the next target should be 2,000 or 5,000.
Well, I'll give you a clue. So obviously 21 million is the number of Bitcoin that will ever exist. A lot of people talk about 1%, and then you can go on those sorts of basis. So it ends up being a lot closer to 2,000 than 5,000. There you go.
Okay. All right. I think people can read into that.
Yeah, but the funny thing about it is we'll all being well, we'll, in my opinion, we'll smash that target incredibly quickly. So that obviously there'll be another target thereafter.
Sure. All right. That's good to hear. Um, okay. So some sort of slightly more technical questions. People are trying to, project forward because that's what we all like to do. Um, but they're kind of concentrating on, the money. Where's the money coming from? Which levers are you pulling, and why and when and all that kind of stuff. So the next one is, when is it best to use the book build or a subscription or the ATM, or all three at once? If you're not using one, why wouldn't you use it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's quite an easy question to answer that one. So the book build side of things, I worked very hard to sort of juggle the potential capital that's interested and try and put it in, in chunks basically. So you'll do that, periodically when you think that it's the right time to do it. So the right time is a balance between the capital being available and the business's growth plans, and the share price really, because that's an important consideration too. At the end of the day, however you generate capital, it needs to be beneficial to the business, and the business is owned by its shareholders. Um, so yeah, that's the first thing. That's the book build side of things. The ATM side of things, I think, is a bit misunderstood actually. I did my best to make it very clear, and I think that I worded it far better than it could have been worded had it been written by someone that wasn't trying to put it in my style. But the ATM is incredibly simple. We cannot sell shares below the price that it closed at yesterday. That in a nutshell is it. So another way of saying that is you cannot sell it on a down day. So expanding on that, you would want to sell a reasonable quantity of shares when the market allowed you to do it. So, if it was an up day, which I know seems like a distant memory to a lot of people, but we did have a lot of up days for 2 months before we had, a week like this. On an up day, what you would do is you wouldn't just throttle the share price by dumping your stock. So it's getting the balance between raising capital for the company through the ATM and allowing the shareholders to see a bit of growth on that front. And if the ATM operator cannot do that successfully, then I'll find another one that can do it. But obviously I don't know how the ATM's gone so far. I just know that which days have been down days, and because of that I know that it won't have been used on those days, because that's the terms of the contract. So I think we just have to evaluate it properly. I did get 1 or 2 messages the last couple of days saying, can you put an announcement out saying you're not using the ATM? And it's like, well, I can't, because they use it in line with the contract, which is do not sell on a down day. And that's intentionally why we only put a relatively small number of shares into the facility, because we wanted to evaluate it properly, because it was a new thing for the UK. In terms of one-off subscriptions, then if somebody wants to put some capital in, then we did that on Monday. I said to the subscriber, do you want to wait for the next book build, or not? And they wanted to put it in then. So we can always do that, if we want to do that, if it's in the interest of the company. So it's a combination of all those things, and for the foreseeable future, as we're talking right now, that's it. We haven't got any sort of plans to do a convertible, right now. We haven't got. We've looked at them, and I don't think that any of them are particularly beneficial at this stage. So that is the short-term strategy. And we've got some very good ideas about what the things will look like in the future. But I've always been honest with people. People can always see that what we've done has been for the benefit of everyone. I would never do something that I didn't believe was the right thing to do for everyone. Obviously I will make mistakes. That's human nature. But I believe in how we're moving forward, and we've got an incredible amount of capital within 2 months. Over £100 million. That's got to be up there with some sort of a record.
Yeah, it's incredible. Okay, so there's been a few questions, and I know you can't tell us who it is, and the privacy and all that kind of stuff. But I think maybe people are looking for a little bit of, to use Jamie's term, colour around the outside. Around, is it predominantly the same people returning raise after raise? Is it new people? Are they predominantly US based? Those kind of vague sort of colour to add to the picture.
Yeah, I can say something on that, in terms of it's a mixture between UK and international capital. It's a mixture between high net worths and institutions. It's a mixture between some new people and some existing people. One of the questions that I've got, I think it might have been earlier today from someone, was, what all these people like, they put money in, which was announced yesterday morning. The share price is, considerably lower than it was then, and I've not had one single one of those people say anything to me other than, they're really looking forward to the future. So, it may be that some of them haven't spoken to me, that, are disappointed with the reaction that we got from, a very good, at the market priced placing. But, no one said anything to me other than that they're very much looking forward to the future. And that's important to me, because it's important to have, shareholders that understand where we're going. They understand that the business does look very cheap right now, as far as we're concerned, anyway. Yeah, we're lucky to have good support. It's quite hard work. If you look at the emerging sort of group in the UK, you'll note that some of them can't raise institutional capital. You can work that one out by yourself by looking at recent fundraising activities. You can see that they can't raise more than, I don't even know what the next best figure is, but it's probably like 4 or 5 million. We raised over £40 million in what is it, 5 hours or something. And that shows that we've got people that believe in what we're doing. And so yeah, that's what I mean when I say that it's been a tough week share price wise, but it's been a great week company wise. Yeah, I can't say any more than that about the breakdown of the book, because that only goes to the people that are actually like the people in the book don't even see each other. The advisors and the brokers, they'll see the majority of that. But yeah, the people in the book don't even know well, they probably do. Some of them will know each other, but they don't necessarily know amounts, names, specifics, and things like that. It's all very private. That's how it works.
Yeah. And you mentioned again the best week, 41.2 million, biggest raise yet. Comfortably should take us over 1,000 Bitcoin when it lands and when it's converted to Bitcoin. From a news perspective, it's been a phenomenal week.
Yeah, also this week, don't forget that we had our biggest ever Bitcoin buy announced. It was almost, in terms of number of Bitcoin, it was very nearly 200 Bitcoin. 200 Bitcoin in a single announcement. That was almost double the previous the previous number. If even if you're only looking at Bitcoin per share gain, which I'm just checking now in the sheet, it's a significant increase. So Bitcoin per share gain basically factors in the number of shares in issue at that point. And in my spreadsheet, I view all the figures worse than they are in real life. In terms of like the treasury, and I put in certain things into the number of shares, for example. The entire ATM facility I put in there, even though most of it isn't applicable at this stage. So that's an incredible growth in terms of Bitcoin per share in a short space of time. So yeah, it has been a good week in terms of the company, and let's hope that next week is a better week as well.
Questions around. Does it feel like maybe there's kind of a saturation in the BTC/TC market in the UK, with new ones popping up day to day?
Yeah. Well, so if you look at this globally, and we've been very clear about this, is that we believe there'll be one dominant force in each geographical region. In France, you've got the blockchain group. In Japan, you've got Metaplanet. In the UK, you've got us. Now, there probably is space for one or two other people in certain regions. There'll be nothing like the person that leads the market. I don't think that it's possible to sort of say who they may be, if at all. Time will tell on that one. I think there's probably been people that have been getting involved in the space that don't understand the model that we're following so much, and that's why I've constantly tried to say to people about whatever you're investing in, whether it's us or another sector, please do the research, make sure that you understand what you're investing in. There will be people chasing those winners, piling into the next one, without even reading the announcement. No names about that one, but there's one particularly shady one at the moment. The saturation doesn't really worry me. It worries me in the sense of I don't like to see people buying something that I think is, crap. But that's nothing that is down to me or that I can control. I think people just need to look at whatever they're investing in and do their research. I think it's probably going to be a short-term thing. I'd imagine on the basis that a lot of these companies have done, everything from cannabis to AI to helium to oil and gas to whatever. I think they'll probably be on to the next bandwagon, in a couple of weeks or months. So we just have to stick to the plan at the end of the day. What we're doing is something that has worked for many, many years in a number of different countries. And we just have to focus on our train tracks. And funnily enough, I was talking to Simon from Metaplanet about it actually the other day. I said, what do you think about this? This is quite strange. In the UK, there's a whole host of these things cropping up. He said, just don't even worry about it. Just focus on what you're doing. It doesn't matter. So that's the plan. And even when I met with Saylor yesterday, and he was very confident that we're on the path. I've talked about where we want to be, in terms of the FTSE 100. One of the biggest companies in the UK, and he was putting a few zeros on that. So we'll just stick to the plan.
Yeah, as always. Okay, so firstly, apologies for the noise that was in the background a minute ago. So when an institution comes along and says, I want to be in a book build, who kind of dictates when that book build happens? Is it you or them or you?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah, so I obviously I'm the CEO. I make all the decisions, good or bad. Sometimes at the very last minute. The way that we do it is if someone's interested in putting capital into the business, they'll make themselves known. That might be direct with me. That might be with one of the brokers. So we know quite a lot of people that we've been speaking to in some cases for quite a long time, and we know who's sort of serious, who wants to have a couple of meetings or might want some more information and all that sorts of stuff. And then I will decide when I want to raise some money. And then what I'll do is I'll bring the brokers inside, quite close to the end, because you want to keep a very, very tight circle on that. And then I'll start putting it together. And then, on the run up to, 4:30 on that day when we announce them, I'll have the RNS ready to go. Obviously price, highlighted because we don't know that price. I'll work with our advisor to, probably send it to them an hour before. I'll speak to them before and say that this is what I'm planning to do. Are you happy with this? But I'll get them the announcement, and then we'll take the orders.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So someone was asking about a sort of future scenario of, obviously we've used up the wrap limit unless full prospectus is issued or we uplist, in which case a prospectus has to be issued anyway. Right. Would they come back into play potentially then with an LSE listing, or are they
Yeah, so Aquis is a fantastic place to raise money because providing you've got the headroom, which we do, you can raise a lot of money if there's a demand from people for your stock. So Aquis is better than the LSE in that regard, much better. The LSE is getting better. So at the moment, if you are LSE listed and you want to raise additional capital, I believe the cap is 20% with a prospectus. Well, it might be 20% and then above that with a prospectus, actually, apologies. Obviously, we're not listed on the LSE at the moment, so I'm a bit rough on those rules, although I'm getting up to speed pretty quick. So Aquis is better for raising money, right? In most ways. With us, you'll probably see a prospectus being done if we are announcing that we're moving to a different market in the future. One of the reasons why we came up with the ATM facility is so that if people want to buy the shares, they can buy the shares. We can effectively place shares which will end up on the market, and when people are buying and selling shares, like me buying shares this morning, I'm buying those shares from someone, indirectly through a market maker. So the great thing about the way that we raise money at the market price to whoever's in the book build, and then the ATM, you're buying them at the market price, and we're getting 97% of the proceeds. People can buy shares and support the company whenever they want. Am I going to do a prospectus, for when we're on Aquis? Probably not, because a prospectus may appear, in a similar time period, subject to what we decide. So yeah, that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully it sort of covers it.
Yeah, and actually it leads on to one of the other questions that was asked, sort of the cost difference, I suppose, between the ATM and a book build. Are they similar? Is one cheaper?
Yeah, it's harder than you would think, actually. So I think I'm allowed to say what commission we pay in our raises. I say almost everything, and that's the way that we'll keep going. So we pay a slightly lower commission on the book builds now, but then any money that I raise from people that I know, we pay a much lower commission, between 0 and a little bit more, dependent on how we're settling the deal. So the figure for the book builds is basically between 0 and 5%, right? That's the commission. So we're doing really well on that front, because of how the books get built and who sources some of the capital. So that's the book builds. Everyone knows the ATM's 3%, yeah, or the subscription that is similar to an ATM, actually. You've got to get the terms right. So 3% is great. If you look at other similar such arrangements, for example, an ATM in the US, that's about 3% those big companies like Strategy will pay in fees. So that's why I came up with 3%. It was a take it or leave it deal, if you want to do it with us. So we get 97% of that money. So, you raise £1 million, you get 970 grand. 30 grand, bit annoying that you have to share that with someone, but they are providing a service. So it's not quite 100% of it that we keep, but it's pretty good.
Getting some questions in the chat that I think we've already covered, but just to make it clear, the way I've understood it, and then you can tell me whether I got it right or not. Maybe we're all misunderstanding it, but there's no current plans to do convertible bonds.
No.
But never say never. But never say never.
Well, so we had a good chat about this yesterday, Michael Saylor and I, and probably can't tell you the conclusions of those. But if you think about it, equity is great. That ties into the model. It's you're in control, yeah. There's other ways that you can do things where you're in control. If you look at a convertible, you have to be incredibly careful of the details. I've just explained how we do the subscription agreement, the rolling one, which is similar to perhaps an ATM. In terms of we get 97% of the money. We want as much fiat money as we can that we can deploy into the treasury as I believe it should be run, i.e. buying Bitcoin as opposed to fiat. So you need to look at the terms of these convertibles, and if I'm honest about it, there are good ones out there. Some of them are absolutely shocking, borderline criminal in my opinion, and I want nothing to do with that sort of stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't say never. If I could get one that I felt was excellent for the company, I would consider it. We're lucky to have really good advisors that can help me with some of these things. And we've now got, sort of other people that have kindly valued their, sort of, said that they'll give us their time whenever we need it. So we've got people, that are, pretty good at running a company like this, that, so I can get the advice from people that I trust and I respect. And so never say never. At the moment, absolutely not.
So just to loop back to Adrian Morris's thing, if Saylor is pretty good,
I describe it as pretty good.
Well, just by you said, we've got some people that.
Oh, he's excellent. He's excellent. We're okay, and he's excellent. All right.
Okay. That gives us the scale.
Yeah, he's right at the top of the game. He's amazing.
Fantastic. Okay, so kind of back to the slew of other companies, not necessarily just UK ones, but they're popping up around the world. They're going to carry on popping up. That's what's going to happen. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think? What's the USP for SWC, or what are the core things that you think someone should look for if they're looking to invest in a Bitcoin treasury?
Yeah, so I think you need to sort of believe that Bitcoin's the very best asset in the world, without stating the obvious. You probably need to accept that a degree of that is because fiat currencies have failed us, and they failed our children big time. So I think you need to believe in Bitcoin to start with. If you do believe in Bitcoin, then I think you need to understand why a company that holds Bitcoin on its balance sheet is good, potentially good, because you're getting exposure to whatever the business is. So in our case, a web design business and their treasury. So that's the next thing. I think the next thing is you've got to have confidence in the management. So have they bought Bitcoin before? Just at a simple level, do they actually understand what it is? It's quite simple things, and I think that then you would get that list of companies down a lot smaller than it is. The next thing is probably, have these people had good careers? Have they done the right thing? Can you trust them? Have they made any bad decisions or any catastrophic decisions in one particular case? And is that a mistake that you can live with? So you can give people another chance, or is it something that's quite bad, so you don't want to give them another chance? You probably don't need to give them another chance, specifically in the UK. So I think you need to do your research, just like you're doing anything else. In terms of the international side of things, then you've got to come back to, in my opinion, our view. I hold 6. Haven't bought any more since we talked last. Companies that have got Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and I believe that they're serving their markets very, very well. And I believe that you need to have people that are based in a country that understand that country, with all the quirks that we have in different countries where we live, to get the most out of that model there. Access to capital, understanding the rules, understanding marketing. Just working on the same time zone, is quite useful. Although my time zone's pretty big at the moment. So yeah, I think, the more companies in this space, the better, as long as they do it properly. They actually buy some Bitcoin. They actually care about it. They're not just trying to do it as a promote, because the 5 things that they've done before in their listed company haven't worked out. So anyone that does it sincerely and does it well and executes well, they would get my respect for sure.
Brilliant. So this question comes up on a daily basis online, and you've definitely answered it before. But there's a lot of new shareholders around now. Do you see like the FCA or UK legislation as a threat or a difficulty or a hurdle? Where are you at with regards?
I see it as a big opportunity, actually. I see it as a big opportunity for people in the UK to get access to Bitcoin. And I hope the FCA in the not too distant future will allow Bitcoin ETFs, ETNs, if you want to call them those. I see it as an absolutely fantastic thing. The banks, for example, if they could be more crypto friendly, that would be great. We're very lucky with the banks that we use that they are. But I think anything that makes it more accessible will be a good thing. I think there's a slight concern with what looks like a bit of a saturated or a frothy or an opportunistic sort of mini sector that's appeared over the last couple of weeks. I don't think that that's a good look for any of us. But that will pass, and some of them will hopefully work out, and most of them won't. I think that concerns me a little bit. But anything that can make the regulations better would get my vote. I've had conversations, and indeed yesterday I said again, I said, you guys need to sort of see all of this and think, what can we do to make this better for the investors? And I'm suggesting that as much as well, they're not really suggesting too much to us because we've done it all already. But I'm actually pushing that one more than people probably see, because I care about it. Anything that makes I wouldn't want things to be massively over regulated, because that's not a good thing either. But I do think that you need the right regulations to to protect everyone, including the companies in the space.
Yeah, and someone's just put in the YouTube chat, if fiat's going to zero against Bitcoin, why wouldn't you want to take on some debt, in those circumstances?
Yeah, so you don't want to be over leveraged at the same time, though. So, for example, let's say you had a load of debt, for example, that was whatever price, it doesn't matter. But then let's say that debt was also secured against the underlying Bitcoin that had been bought with that debt, for example, which is perfectly possible with some of these smaller companies, maybe even not disclosed. Then what's going to happen then with if that debt can't be exercised, i.e. it doesn't convert, you're going to have a big problem on your hands. We've got a great balance sheet, over £100 million, or equivalent, because obviously a lot of it's held in Bitcoin, and that's a strong position to be in. But I don't feel confident at the moment in taking debt. I don't think we need to at the moment if we can take equity. So if fiat's going to zero comment, that's equally applicable to equity, as it is. We had a good chat yesterday about Bitcoin-backed debt and the pros and cons of that as well. So it's quite a complicated subject matter. I think what I'd say to everyone is, I'm looking at all of the different options, and I've had loads of things, some reasonable, some terrible, and I think people just have to trust me that I'm doing my very, very best. I'm focused on making this very, very successful. We've had a good start, and for me personally, I need this to work over 1, 3, 5, 10 years, and that's all I'm focused on. How can I make my company one of the biggest companies in the UK and then the world, get taken seriously by people that are sort of knowledgeable on companies that structure their finances in this way, and if I can't do that job in the future and people don't think that I'm the right person to do it, then that's fine as well. But for the moment, I think that I'm getting it mostly right. So I'll look at everything all of the time, but as I say, we haven't got any plans in the short term. We haven't got anything on the table that would be right for the company at this stage. So therefore we're not doing anything other than what everyone knows about: straight equity, ATMs responsibly, and individual subscriptions should we feel it's right for the company.
Brilliant. So there's a lot of talk, I think, based off the back of the share price action this week, about short interest. People have brought up the whole Chanos and Saylor go long BTC, short the LBEs. Do you think that poses a problem for SWC? Do you think, a lot of people are unclear whether Aquis can be shorted or not. The Apex section, I believe, can't, but we're in the access section, and there doesn't seem to be any data available online on that.
Well, you can short anything you want in theory, right? So, contrary to what they say, if you and I, if you own some shares and I do a deal with you that I want to sell that same number of shares and you lend me those shares, then I've got to borrow. So you can short anything that you want. You can short anything that you want illegally as well. If you're that sort of a person, it might go bad, really bad, possibly really quick. But you can short anything that you want as long as you get a borrow, because I would be selling your shares on the market, and then I would have a contract with you that when you want to call that borrow in, I will buy those shares in the market and deliver them to you. I think it'd be quite difficult to short our stock on any massive size. I'm aware of some of the rumours, but it's not like, say, like Strategy in the States, for example, where there's a lot of banks that hold a lot of stock and they've got different cost centres that will be responsible for earning a yield on the stock that's held. So I've never really understood why they do that. Why you would effectively be a business, and then you've got that profit center there, and then you've got that profit center there that's effectively weakening a stock to earn maybe a couple of % a year or something by lending that stock. Take my older employer, Hargreaves, for example, and anyone can check this, they can read it in their terms. They do not offer any of the stock on their platform out for lending. So, an awful lot of our stock is held at places where it will not be lent. So therefore that stock cannot be used for shorting. But there will be some of it, I'm sure. I think it's a bit of a murky world, that whole thing. There's one particular person that I've been made aware of who hasn't actually reached out to me. I'd quite like to have a chat to them actually, but they've not used the telephone number on the website or the email address to reach out to me. So maybe they could, unless they just want to keep saying what they're saying. Maybe they have got a short. Maybe it's a big short. I was told that they borrowed a load of money to do the short from a credible source. So, I think some of it does go on, but I don't think it's of any size that particularly is any relevance. It's probably, like a 10 grand short or something like that. It's probably not a significant short that, is massively going to move the market. But I might be wrong.
Sure. And kind of back to, I guess, kind of more political FCA stuff. Are you aware of any political interest in SWC and the other BTC-TCs? And has your local MP even shown an interest? Is there?
Good point there. So one of the things I've got to do, which I must confess I haven't done yet, is now that we're back at a Bristol address formally as of Monday. I need to write to the local MP to let them know that what we've done, and perhaps they could sort of do whatever they do to support us. So I must do that, but I haven't done it yet. Maybe I'll do it this weekend. Away from that, I hope that they're looking at the sector, the powers that be, to make sure that it's being controlled and that there isn't anyone doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But other than that, no, I'm not aware of anything.
Sure. And then I know you can never give away details because rules and regs, but are we to expect more news next week? It seems like we get news every week. Is that going to continue?
Yeah, so be open and transparent as usual. That we'll announce things when we need to announce things. Clearly we've got a lot of money that needs to be deployed next week. I think I'll probably try and surprise people with the pattern of that. Although with 5 days in the week, it's quite difficult to mix it up that much. So yeah, I think that's quite a likely thing for people to expect. In the sense of being open as well, though, I'm not sure whether we'd bother raising any capital at this level purely from a share price level. I've got interest for capital, but I don't think I'd take it right now, to be honest with you. That decision and opinion will change, obviously, as we navigate, because I do want to keep my acceleration going, but I've got loads of options for that anyway. If some of the things that we've done to date don't work for my shareholders, and by that I mean in terms of share price and the business accelerating at the rate that I want, then I've got plenty more tricks up my sleeves on that one. Not that I've got any sleeves on today, I've got a t-shirt on, but yeah, I've got plenty of ideas of alternative ways that could be accommodated. Very beneficial. People would love those things as well. So yeah, I don't think I've let anyone down today, have I? I think we've had news every week, often more than one bit of news. So yeah, there's no reason why that won't continue.
Sure. And I guess that kind of links on to the final question that I've got, which is, is it more difficult to raise capital when the share price has gone down, or is it just a case of there's people that are interested and they'll enter whenever?
Yeah, so sort of yes and no, really. It's, in a way, it's easier because they're getting more for their money. But it's harder for me. A lot of the people that support the raises, they're not even fussed about the price. Sometimes they'll put their order in before I even tell them what the closing price was. Sort of yes and no is probably the best answer to that one. If you really had to say, well, you can't say yes or no, you have to give me an answer, I'd probably say the lower the share price, the easier it is, but that's the market's job at the end of the day. The market's job is to set the share price, and if the market believes that we're valued at £2, as opposed to £3 or £4 or £1.50 or whatever, then that's what the price is,
Brilliant. Actually, I've got one more. Are there any upcoming events that you're attending that people could potentially see you at or attend themselves?
Yeah, so the next event actually is, one of our brokers, Peterhouse, is doing an event in London on this Thursday afternoon. So I'll be there. I've got a really packed day actually before, and then that's at 3:00. And I think that's sort of, some advisors, I think it might be full, to be fair, but, sort of maybe contact them and say you're a Smarter Web shareholder, and hopefully I'll make some space. So that's one thing in the very near future. There is, of course, there's the Bitcoin conference in Hong Kong where I'll be speaking, which I'm very much looking forward to. That'll be really good. It's smaller than the Vegas one, but they're doing the same sort of, program with, ourselves from the UK, Metaplanet, Strategy. I'm not sure who from Strategy will be there actually, but basically, the companies that are doing it well. So that'll be a great event. Henry the chef is doing a second event in September, a bit of a bigger event. So that would be quite nice as well, because that would be nice to meet more people. There's a couple of other things. There's another UK based event in September. There's bound to be other things. So apologies anyone that I've sort of forgotten there, but what I'll always try and do is a week, 2 weeks before things, put them out there so that people can be aware of these things that are going on. I'll stick them on X, so yeah, there are plenty of things going on. For looking further afield, get maybe Vegas next year, whether it's the Bitcoin for Corporations event, which I believe is in maybe March off the top of my head, or it might be February. Obviously, the conference in April. There might be another good event coming up in the UK that we shouldn't really talk about. Might be a biannual thing. That'd be quite exciting when I can talk about that one. So yeah, there's plenty going on, and of course, the highlight of the Bitcoin conference calendar is the Abu Dhabi event, which my friend organises. So if Greg's watching, he'll be quite pleased that I've not forgotten that one. And that's a fantastic event. Coincides with the F1, so people that like F1 can go to the F1 and then go to the Bitcoin conference. So that's a pretty good weekend. So yeah, there's plenty going on.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, Andrew.
Pleasure.
It's always great to have you on, and yeah, we look forward to you relentlessly executing for another 2 months, 2 years, 20 years.
Yeah, we will just keep doing our best, and we appreciate everyone's support. Even on a tough week like this week, share price wise, most people have been pretty positive. If anyone ever has got any ideas of what we could do better, then feel free to shout. And we just stick to the plan, and hopefully continue trying to move it forward.
Fantastic. Next week Andrew won't be with us, but it'll be Jamie, the Desert Ape, back with me, and it'll be a slightly different time. It'll be 11 a.m. UK time, because it's my son's first sports day, and I'm not missing that.
Have a good time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.